Quite often, you'll hear people from Generation X and baby boomers talking about how Millennials and Generation Z are unmotivated and make poor choices. That's especially true when it comes to money. They'll often talk about how things were better back in their day, and maybe things were a lot better back in their day. Let's take a look at some things and find out why. We'll leave feelings and opinions and other stuff like that out of this for a little bit, and look at some cold hard numbers. We're going to look at the US economy of today as compared to 25 years ago and 50 years ago. That's going to be 2023, 1998, and 1973 respectively. Generation X was becoming adults around 1998. They were born roughly between the early 1960s and early 1980s. They were in their late teens to late 30s around this time. The baby boomers were becoming adults around 1973, born after World War II between the mid-1940s and mid-1960s. They were in their late teens to early 30s around this time also. I want all three generations to come together for a moment and see how things were then and now, and compare those time periods. And we can all find out together why some people just don't seem as motivated as previous generations. Believe it or not, it's not just about willpower or motivation, and it's not even just inflation working against us. Because in some ways, the place of work does have a lot to do with the problem. Let's cover some changes in income over the years. Then we'll look at some differences in the cost of living and compare that to inflation. Once we're all on the same page, we'll be able to clearly see what the real problem is. And unfortunately, it's not as simple as inflation. I'm actually going to show a chart at the end of this video showing an average budget with the average income and expenses that a average family would have. And I'll even compare that in today's dollars so it can be clearly understood by everybody. So let's go with income. Over the years, the average income has seen a significant decline. In 1973, the average income was around $12,000 a year. That doesn't sound like a lot, but in today's money, that equals about $82,500. That would be pretty good income. Fast forward to 1998, people are making $38,000 a year, which is approximately $71,000 today. That's not bad, but you still see a slight decrease there. However, in the current year of 2023, there's been a continued drop in the average income, plunging to $52,000 a year. There are Americans out there surviving on $52,000 a year. That's not possible. This decline may have been influenced by various economic factors and challenges in recent times. For those who have trouble understanding these numbers and why they matter, a person of average income today earns only 73% of what they would have 25 years ago, and 63% of what they would have made 50 years ago. For the same work, I'm paid 25% less than my parents' generation, and 37% less than my grandparents' generation. If you grew up and became an adult between the 1970s or the 1990s, you enjoyed a very different world than my generation inherited. You could say that you lived in a golden era while my generation is suffering in a dystopia. This is why millennials are struggling financially, and it's not because they're lazy or bad with money. It's because the world's screwing them over and not paying them what they deserve for the work that they do. Now, I was surprised to see that taxes really hadn't gotten much worse in the last 50 years. It's a common belief that the government keeps taking more and more and more, and the numbers simply don't show that. The average modern tax rate for federal tax for people who pay federal tax is 22%. Now, that was 28% in 1998, which is an increase from the 25% that it was in 1973. So now people with average income are doing better. That means that the government is stealing 3% less of our paychecks than they were a quarter century ago. That's still more than the 0% that it should be, since all taxes are theft. But when I say the world is screwing us over, The world we live in was created by the previous generations. The same generation that raised us, I might add. Now, that's not targeted at the standard working class families, that's the owners of companies and politicians of those generations. The people who represent us in our government and corporate owners and stuff like that. So to add insult to injury, my generation is criticized by the older generations for not being motivated, smart, or ambitious enough as we struggle. And honestly, a lot of people are getting tired of it. Imagine how much different your life would have been with a quarter to a third of your income missing. Where would you be now, and how much worse would your life be? Okay, so let's look at housing. This is one I did not expect to see either. It's commonly believed that real estate is a great investment, right? Well, the cost of buying a home has actually gone down over the years, meaning the value of a home has gone down over the years. In 1973, it was $22 per square foot. That is equal to about $151 a square foot today. In 1998, that dropped to $77 per square foot, or $43 in today's money. Now at the present time, it comes in at $137 per square foot. Based on this data, we can estimate the cost of an average house in this area over these different years. In 1973, that would have been $34,000, which equals about $234,000 in today's money, about $250,000. In 1998, that same house would have cost $122,000, or $228,000 in today's money. Today, that same house is worth $219,000 for the same house. So overall, this shows a clear trend of decreasing house costs over the years, which might be good news for potential buyers, other than taking into account that income's a lot less. But this also indicates that that investment loses its buying power, leading you to believe you're making a lot of money when you're actually losing money. And additionally, the big one that's preventing us from getting a house is stricter credit requirements that previous generations simply did not have to deal with, and are now more important than who you know or whether or not you have good rental payment history or even enough money to pay the mortgage. Just because you're a good person and can afford to pay your rent does not translate to being able to buy a home, even if the payments are cheaper. And a lot of people who grew up in a world where this wasn't the case cannot understand this. Now let's talk about rent. The rental costs have showed a dramatic upward trend over the years. In 1973, rent was, for a home like I live in, $150, which adjusted for inflation in today's currency would be valued around $1,030. In 1998, this increased up to $500. And then in 2023, rent has risen further to $1,300 a month. Keep in mind, the average pay in this country is $52,000 a year. The data indicates a consistent increase in rental properties over the years. In 1973, renters paid considerably less. But in today's market, the cost has gone up significantly. Tenants need to be aware of this trend when considering buying a home or renting whatever the housing budget is. So in the last 25 years, the difference in cost of renting is the difference in being able to make a car payment or pay your family's phone bill, both of which have also skyrocketed in cost. It means that many people my age will never be able to purchase a home. even if they can make the rent every single month. All of this is compounded by the fact that, as I pointed out in the previous section, you have to work about 30% harder, or even 40% harder, and longer to get each one of those dollars that your cost of living goes up by. This is in addition to all of this being masked by inflation, lowering the value of those dollars. Now let's look at transportation. Now you're going to have to get between your low-paying job and expensive apartment somehow, right? It's time to buy a car. The cost of new cars has generally shown an upward trend over the years. Let's look at the most purchased cars of each of these three time periods. In 1973, the Chevy Impala was one of the most popular cars and sold the most. It came in at $3,500, $3,500, which adjusted for inflation in today's currency would be around $21,000. That's not much. I have a pretty cheap car and it costs more than that. In 1998, an F-150 was one of the most popular cars at $16,000. In today's money, that's $26,000. Presently, the current year of the Hyundai Elantra, which is the most selling car this year, is $23,000. The data clearly indicates the price of new cars has increased significantly over the years. In the past, purchasing a Chevy Impala would have cost considerably less than today's prices for a similar vehicle. It's evident that inflation and other economic factors have played a role in this price escalation. In more recent years, people have switched to purchasing cheaper and lower-end model cars due to the upward trend slightly skewing the pricing data for a new car. An Impala is considerably more than an Elantra after all, and not everyone can afford a pickup truck. Now, how do we fuel these vehicles? This will surprise a lot of people. The cost of a gallon of gas has witnessed a steady increase in the years. In 1973, it was priced at 39 cents per gallon, which adjusted for inflation in today's currency value would be equal to about $2.68. In 1998, the total price rose to $1.06 per gallon, equivalent to about $1.98 in today's money. Presently, in 2023, the cost of a gallon of gasoline is $3.59. That is a lot more, but that's only about $1 per gallon. But keep in mind, you have to work twice as hard for that dollar for each gallon. And given how much I drive to and from work and the size of my fuel tank and fuel efficiency, that's about $60 to $70 a month more. That increase is equivalent to you being able to pay your water bill. Now, what about electric cars? No gas, right? Well, we have to burn more coal to produce more power, and we don't have enough coal to produce enough electricity for everyone to charge these electric cars. Renewable resources like electric and wind don't exist in my area, and they don't produce enough electricity anyway. If we could be like other countries and go to something like nuclear power, that could be an option. But it's probably not going to happen, at least not in my area. And even if it did, the cost of your electricity goes up so much when you charge an electric car that it actually costs a lot more than filling up a gas tank with fuel. Of course, if you can afford an electric vehicle, you probably don't know what I'm talking about and can't understand this anyway. Now, our government forces you to buy certain products, which is not in the spirit of free market at all. One of these is car insurance. In 1973, car insurance was approximately $42 a month. Adjusted for inflation in today's currency value, that would be $288. In 1998, that cost moved to around $69, or equivalent to $129. Presently, in 2023, car insurance has increased to about $115. And I say it's increased because that's your insurance premiums, but your deductibles have actually gone up to where the cost of using that insurance is going to cost you a lot more. As with almost everything else here, while the dollar cost is higher, the dollar is worth less. You have to keep that in mind. The product actually appears to be costing less. However, it's likely because those who actually use these government mandated products will have their personal rates increase dramatically. So you can't really look at the average of these. The rule seems to be that you're legally required to buy it, but don't you dare use it. Again, this is compounded by the fact that you have to work about 30% harder and longer hours to get each one of those dollars. It's just because the cost of living went up. This is in addition to inflation lowering the value of those dollars. Okay, so let's look at groceries now. You have to eat, right? How else are you gonna have the energy to do all that work? In 1973, just a week's worth of food and expenses were approximately $30, which adjusted for inflation, you're looking at about $200 a week. In 1998, the cost of food went up to about $125 a week, or equivalent to $230 in today's money. Presently, in 2023, food expenses are $250 a week. That's if you want to eat well. Honestly, I don't think anybody can afford that. And to feed a family of 5, I spend half that, and we make it work. The data here reveals a clear trend of increasing food costs over the years. In the past, purchasing food was considerably cheaper compared to today's prices. The inflation-adjusted values demonstrate the impact of rising prices of food expenses, which reflects the general trend of increasing food prices due to various economic factors. We got supply chain dynamics, different kinds of viruses affecting plants, overuse of soil, and much more. Now, the food we're buying is not the same as what was being bought back in the day. If you're from a previous generation, the food you had growing up was much more nutritious. And I'm talking about even if you ate just fresh fruits and vegetables now and then. The food now is grown to be grown fast and high in calories. That way it can sell more. That does not mean it has nutritional value to keep you healthy. So yeah, food was basically all organic in the past. Purchasing organic foods like they had in 1973 would take that modern day cost of $250 a week to up to over $400 a week. I spend about $200 every 2 weeks, and there's 5 of us. Again, my family of 5 survives on half of the average. And that's eating up with an empty refrigerator by payday. And by the way, if you're struggling, one good tip is to add garbanzo beans to just about everything you cook. They can, just 1 or 2 cans can stretch a hamburger helper meal by another day or 2. And it only costs you like another $1, so it's really good. Now let's go over GMOs for a moment. You've probably heard about these. It's the opposite of organic produce. GMO stands for genetically modified organism, and GMOs are foods or other things whose genetic material has been altered or modified through genetic engineering techniques. That involves manipulation of the organism's DNA in a way that does not occur naturally or through traditional breeding methods. In agriculture, genetically modified crops have been developed to process specific and desirable traits. One big one is GMO crops being engineered to be resistant to certain pests, diseases, and environmental stresses, which is much harder on the plants now. This can improve crop yields and reduce the need for chemical pesticides, which is good, but they most likely still use them anyway. Now, other GMOs have been improved, designed to have improved nutritional content or longer shelf life, but they generally skew more toward the longer shelf life side of it. Now, there's a big problem with GMOs. They are genetically designed to be less desirable to wildlife, insects, and also encapsulate and ignore a chemical called glyphosate. This is a deadly herbicide that kills almost all plants and causes cancer in humans. Instead, the GMO crop, instead of dying, will take the glyphosate and form something like a cyst around it, chemically encapsulating it so the plant can continue growing without being affected. And this is great for crop production because the crop safely encapsulates the poisonous carcinogenic chemicals and continues growing. The problem is, you take that home and cook it and eat it, and you digest it, and you absorb those chemicals. These crops grow a lot faster, but they have less nutritional value and can cause cancer. Just think about it for a minute. That's what you're paying more for. So you're working 30% harder to buy crops of lower quality that can give you cancer for twice as much as what healthy organic crops in the past would have cost. Now, why would you do that? Because it's better than starving to death, which kills you faster than cancer. So what about healthcare? Now that we're talking about these kind of diseases and stuff. Now that we've covered what our food is doing to us, let's segue into healthcare for the cost of healthcare. There have been significant and steady increases of healthcare costs per person over the years. In 1973, the average cost of healthcare per person was relatively low. They paid roughly $73, which adjusted for inflation, about $500. That's per year. This is including health insurance premiums, medication costs, hospital visits, doctor's office visits, and more. By 1998, these expenses had risen to $986. That's equivalent to about $1,846 in today's money. Presently, in 2023, that cost has surged to $4,400 per person. That's 10% of what is considered average income in this country. It's ridiculous. That's why other countries call our healthcare system the pay-to-live system. This data indicates and underscores a remarkable escalation in healthcare costs, highlighting complex factors driving these rising costs within the healthcare industry. These factors include advancements in medical technologies, which is good. Then the demand for healthcare services, with everyone being sick and malnourished. Pharmaceutical developments, and the overall complexity of the healthcare systems could have contributed to this. However, that's not all of it. There have also been several instances of insane and significantly inflated prices for simple items and services. For example, there have been cases of patients billed hundreds of dollars for a single Tylenol tablet. That's thousands of dollars for a blood test that would typically cost $100 outside of that setting. So then you have the average cost of a hospital stay, which is tens of thousands of dollars, depending on specific services provided. If you ever go to the hospital or doctor, ask for an itemized bill detailing everything and see how much they charge you. You're going to be pissed. This is not only due to inflation. This is due to shady medical practices in this country. But keep in mind that these prices are still compounded by your work being devalued by over 30%. Okay, so why would we work way harder for less money, pay higher rent, that prevents us from ever being able to buy a home and continue eating food that's actually killing people? Because it's better than being homeless and starving. That is where the bar is now. As for the healthcare issues, you know what living under that kind of stress does to the body and mind. This is why so many people my age are depressed and suffering from anxiety. It's likely a form of PTSD from living in a world we inherited from the generations before us. There is no mental energy left to care about work ethic, especially when we're all this underpaid. If you are close to being retired, or your house is almost paid off, you probably have no idea what this world is like for people not lucky enough to have been born when you were. America is on the edge of falling into the state of a third world country. Most of us can see this. In fact, most of the world sees it too. America's credit rating, amongst other nations, was just dropped again recently. It's not a surprise. So let's quickly go over a budget plan for each decade, using average numbers of income and expenses for those time periods. If you're older than even just 40 years old, but you're not old at all, I think this is going to surprise you. So, you can see this chart that I should be putting on the screen right about now. Just take a moment to look at this. So in 1973, the average income was $1,000 per month. After you take into account taxes, which would be about $280, rent, $150, car payment, $58, $42 for your car insurance, $26 a month for gas. Your healthcare costs are going to cost you $6. Food is about $120. Gas and electric, $30. Water, $7. You didn't have internet. Trash is $3. Phone bill is $20. Cable TV is $15. And the total expenses come to $737. Consequently, in 1973, you had a surplus of $243 a month on average, meaning your income exceeds your expenses by a lot. And one of my kids' toys is randomly going off at 2 o'clock in the morning. That's awesome. It's weird how children's toys do that. Okay. Now, of course, countless other things appear in a monthly budget. Unexpected things pop up, eating out, etc. But that $243 in 1973 money is worth $1,800 today. With that kind of money, you can save up a down payment on a house, make sure all your bills are paid on time. You can raise your credit score pretty good, pay off sooner. eat out all the time. You can live comfortably, afford to tithe without it bothering you at all, put a few $100s away for retirement, and go on vacations. That's living the life. Moving forward to 1998, the average income was $3,100 a month. After considering taxes of $887, $500 rent, $266 car payment, car insurance of $69, gasoline being $71, healthcare $82, food $500, gas and electric $110, water $24, internet $12, trash $10, cable or satellite television, which not everyone would buy, $60, totaling expenses of $2,700. And this year, you have a budget surplus of $536, showing that your income exceeds your expenses, which is good. But of that $536, you still have random expenses, you know. But keep in mind, pay is coming down, expenses are going up. While it looks like you had more than generation before you, it's not much. Because that $536 is roughly $146 in 1973 money. And in 1973, you had $243 in their currency. So money's getting tighter and you're working harder. However, you can still most likely afford to tithe, put away money for retirement, and go on vacations. You just have to budget a little bit more. Now let's look at 2023. Average income comes in at $4,300 a month. If you pay taxes, you're looking at $950 a month in that. Then $1,300 a month for rent, a car payment of $380, car insurance $115. Yeah, right. That might be average. I actually paid about double that. Gasoline is $240 a month. Healthcare is $366. Food $1,000. Gas and electric. Water is $45. Internet is $90. Trash is $20. Your phone bill is $180. Streaming services, which replace cable and satellite TV, come to $120. Total expenses amount to $4,900. That indicates that in the year 2023, you have a budget deficit of negative $700 a month. Almost negative $800 a month, I mean. That is where your expenses exceed your income by a lot. So what do you do? Okay. Cut streaming services, buy less and cheaper food, maybe not pay your phone bill on time, fall behind on your car payment every few months, and if you have the option to work a ton of overtime, find some side hustles. All this stuff helps. Maybe you qualify for food stamp or WIC, but you have to be much lower income to qualify for that, so probably not qualifying for food stamps. WIC is likely, depending on how many kids you have. You can also use those tax credits if you have children to skip the federal tax altogether and break even if you're lucky and you budget tightly. Now there's no vacations, there's no saving retirement, but hey, you have a roof over your head and you're not going to starve to death yet. And you have electricity to keep the lights on. And you're not going to retire anyway, so don't even bother with that. With this kind of stress and everything, most people probably won't last to retirement age anyway. This is really what life is like for most people my age in America. Before you look down on my generation for having trouble with money, mental health issues like anxiety and depression, ADHD, not being motivated or ambitious as your generation was, or posting things like, if you want to help, my PayPal is this address. Look at how good you had it and what we have to deal with. Not everyone can find a good fit for anxiety and depression medication. I'm lucky enough to have found one that works for me, and it helps a little bit. Although that's just another expense in the budget. Some people are not even that lucky, and maybe your brain chemistry doesn't play well with these meds. So what are they to do? Illegal drugs and video games? Both of which hit the budget just as hard. And some people can't even afford to do that, and they can't find an outlet to help. It just builds up until they snap. I'm not condoning that, of course, but I'm not surprised when I see it either. When you have an entire society of people pushed to the breaking point at all times, people break down. If you want to help, there are things you can do. You can write to your politicians and ask them to ease the tax burden on the less wealthy. Or if you run a company, pay your employees a wage they can live on. And before you even ask, I despise the Democratic Party. But the Republican Party is not any better. The main problem here is not inflation. It's not lack of motivation. Its wages are not keeping up with inflation. For example, I got a 3% cost of living raise, but the cost of living probably has gone up 10 to 15%. If you're struggling and you have the option to work overtime, then do it. I'll work over $60 in net. I'll work over 60 hours a week just to make sure my family can eat. So we are just as motivated as other generations. We just have a much harder life ahead of us. So just think about that and try to build a better world.